I've always been curious, how did you go from Pepsi to Apple then to wireless? That seems like three dramatically different areas, at least back.
Well, I can give you first Pepsi to Apple. They were recruiting a CEO of Apple. Steve Jobs at that point was 26 years old, and the board didn't think he was ready to be CEO. But they did give him the veto right over whoever they chose. And they went through all the logical people that you would think would come in from high tech to run Apple. Steve turned them down. So David Rockefeller said, well, maybe we need to try another part of the country and another industry. And it turned out that Steve always believed that personal computers were going to be great consumer products. And nobody in the early 1980s was doing consumer marketing for high tech. So when he came to Pepsi, and I took him through what we were doing at that time with the Pepsi Challenge and how it was all about experience marketing. And we showed the experience of the longtime Coca-Cola drinker in markets where we were outsold 10 to 1, discovering in a blind taste test that they actually preferred Pepsi over Coke. And that was just an incredible, wow, I can't believe it moment. That campaign was really successful. And Steve loved that. And he said, I'm building this new product called Macintosh. And it's all about the user experience. And you've got to come to Apple and teach us how do we do consumer marketing for high tech, learning the things that you are doing in the Cola Wars. And so that's what brought me to Apple. And after Apple, I was interested in what's the next thing that's coming after personal computers. I'd been working on a product in the last year that I was there was called Newton. The product was never successful commercially, but all of the technologies we developed. We co-developed the ARM processor, which is now in 6 billion mobile devices. We developed the first object-oriented software for mobile devices, a lot of the interfaces that are used on touchscreen devices. And so I decided that mobile was going to be the next big thing. And I got involved with a number of mobile companies, including Infonic, which turned out to be a $1.6 billion success story, and Metro PCS, which turned out to be a $9 billion success story. So I've continued to have a real love for mobile, and of course it only gets bigger and bigger. And a lot of what we do at Zeta Interactive is reaching people on their mobile devices. I think the best definition of a genius is someone who sees the obvious 20 years ahead of the rest of us. I can remember back in 1984, Steve had this idea for something he called the Mac phone. That's great. And Steve was not a drawer, so he's a great visionary, but he couldn't draw. I could draw because I had studied design. And so Steve would describe it to me and I'd draw it out. I'd say, is this what you mean? He said, no, we'll make the screen a little bit bigger and make the handset a little different. Remember, this is back in the era before the idea of mobile phones even existed. So we were still talking about a screen on a phone on a desk, which incorporated Mac technology. We never actually built that product until years later because there wasn't any technology that even made that possible. But we made hard models of it. And years later, someone from Japan, from Sony, because we worked with Sony very closely in terms of the components that went into Macintosh, actually sent me a picture of the original one cool. that I had designed. It was Steve's design, but I'd drawn the picture of.
Today we call that the iPhone.
Unfortunately, it was not as good as the iPhone, well, but it was Steve's vision, and I was there to help.